So our distinguished panelists for this next session are Her Excellency Raja Al Mazrui, CEO of Etihad Credit Insurance, Mohammed Al Kamali, Chief Trade and Industry Officer at ADIO, Ben Powell, who is Chief Investment Strategist for APAC and the Middle East at BlackRock Investment Institute, and moderating this conversation, we will have Paula Naufal, who is Senior Reporter at CNN Business Arabic. I believe we are ready, so please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Usually, when a nation faces a crisis, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a war or supply chain disruption, the nation scrambles for solutions. But the story in the UAE was a bit different. They had everything set in place ahead of time, whether it's the buffers, the legal framework, and the trade networks. Ben, I want to kick off with you. How do you assess the UAE's resilience amidst all that is happening at the moment?
Ongoing, I think. So you framed it correctly in our opinion from BlackRock, the world's largest investor by far, that in a world where everything is easy, you actually don't need to be so thoughtful around your legal structure, your trade relationships, kind of everything just works in a way as if by magic. And that's roughly the environment the world was living in, probably after the Berlin Wall came down, on November the 9th, 1989, through to maybe 2020. We had a relentless progress in terms of globalization, and I would say not just in terms of the practical aspects of globalization, so trade going up and up, but also a philosophy, as the kids say, the vibes were good, right, in terms of globalization and more togetherness. Not every day, but in general, I would say that's right. Now we're in an extremely different global environment, and what that means is those economies which are stable and resilient are absolutely outstanding. So perhaps the UAE is roughly on the same trajectory it was 5-10 years ago, but the world is on a radically different, I would say, worse trajectory, and that makes the stability of jurisdictions, including Singapore, including the UAE, is quite a small number actually, but these jurisdictions for sure include this one, become more and more valuable, it seems to me, in a world of more and more uncertainty.
Is it that they were forward-looking, or is it they assumed the worst, or looking more at black swan events?
For the UAE, I think we are, if I can say we, I'm living Yas Island, so I will say we if you permit it. So we are, I think, creating an amazing society just in absolute terms. And the relative will do whatever the relative does. Obviously, the UAE will work for progress and peace and prosperity for the world, but even a very powerful country like the UAE can't do so much in terms of when the elephants fight, when the US and China are having some of their conversations, let's say. So the UAE, we, of course, we try to be positive part of the global environment, but what can we really control is UAE. So I think we're seeing a focus on developing a society, not just, how can I say, flourishing economically, but also is a great place to live and work for. To talk for myself, my wife, our 4 children, is somewhere we want to make a life. So I think, if you will, that's a standalone truth which will persist whatever the kind of external environment can be. But again, maybe in a complicated world, this is becoming more and more outstanding because the world is going in a slightly different direction.
Your Excellency, I wanted to ask you, so when maritime routes are strained, risk profiles and financial pressures escalate immediately. Given the current geopolitical situation and the rise in maritime and trade insurance costs, how is the ECI navigating the environment? And have you raised your premiums?
So ECI was actually created for times like this and risks like this. export credit agencies are ensuring businesses throughout their export journey. And Etihad Credit Insurance continues to protect the exporters from the UAE as they scale and export outside the UAE. Now, uncertainty in the geopolitical landscape will continue to be there, whether it's today or in a decade from now. And that's why our products are designed in this way, to look at different aspects of these risks and enable these companies to identify growth markets, to identify alternative trade routes, and also to partner through ECI with global financial institutions and global export credit agencies, where we are able to diversify and partner in absorbing these risks. With regards to premiums, no, we have not increased our premiums. On the contrary, we've actually increased our appetite for risk to support UAE exporters, in particular small and medium enterprises. And also we have slowed down the collection cycle to enable those companies manage their own cash flows. We continue to do that. We work with these companies as partners in their growth journey, and we continue to identify trade routes, trade markets for them to scale and grow, and continue to deal with these risks as they will continue to exist.
And how are you dealing with worried traders?
Absolutely. I mean, all traders are worried currently. And in the beginning, when you start talking about these trade credit insurance and guarantees for exports, they were not as worried before. But now with the current situation, I think that really alerted a lot of these traders to the importance of protecting their trade with a credit insurance policy that will help them either avoid these markets or collect their overdue payments or get paid for contracts that actually failed.
Hamad, with all that is happening, how is Abu Dhabi leveraging its long-term investments in infrastructure and industrial ecosystems and trade connectivity to strengthen its current position and standing?
Thank you, first of all, for having us over here. It's a great pleasure to be with everyone. From our perspective, we go back to the foundation that we have when it's come to the growth that we have seen also in 2024, which is bringing a foundation to whatever that you will be accelerating in the future. Despite the fact, if we look also at our, manufacturing sector in Abu Dhabi, which is contributing heavily to the non-oil GDP growth as well, to the city itself, it's a testament to see actually the growth that we have seen on the past 3 years, which is again going back to be a strong foundation in order to help and support. Looking also at the for example, when we talk about transportation and logistic, which is also having a growth with no less than 14.9%, is again something which is keeping us standing on a very important foundation. So when disruption comes, you go back to basic and to understand basically how you accelerate. Looking at it also from a logistic perspective and to look at the multimodal mode of transports that we have, whether when it's come to the air, sea, and also the growth that we see also in our rail connectivity is something which is remarkable. If you put all of these kind of things, this is our foundation to make sure that we sustain trade and we look at the growth that we will anticipate to have, even with the disruption that we see over here. But when those kind of disruption comes, an important policies, or let's say, for example, also initiative should actually address those kind of challenges. And a few weeks back, we've launched in collaboration with 7X a platform in which actually we look at the challenges that companies are having when it's come to the trade side as well. It was actually built on AI, making sure that also we have a strong foundation on the other side on an AI perspective. So when it comes to us in Abu Dhabi, again, if I will summarize this point, it's important to look at the foundation in terms of where we are standing, to look at what kind of programs that we have, initiative that will actually accelerate the current manufacturers and exporters that we have in terms of business, in terms of international reach, as well as looking at the capabilities as well that which we have in the market over here. I think, when we talk about AD ports, the way that they are managing the trade flows is something remarkable. We do have several also trade facilitation team across the government in collaboration also with the private sector to make sure that we attend all of any possible challenges that our trader will be facing.
Ben, so you spoke about something very important, and it's globalization. And Ben, I wanted to ask you specifically on that. So in recent years, we've seen more of trade clusters rather than globalization. Even UNCTAD data has shown that we've seen perhaps more bilateral trade, more clusters. Do you think this is going to stay, or are we going to return to a more globalized trade system?
No, I think it's going to stay, and I think it's actually going to only increase. So, as I say, the philosophy seems to have shifted away from a sense of globalization towards a much more, there's a Chinese phrase, they call it self-reliance. So it's a much more focus on being independent. You can have friendly relations, but maybe the world, we don't have friends anymore, right? You can have overlapping interest in different subjects, different area, and you can have different collaboration, if you like, in trade, in defense, in other area. But I think they are inherently more dynamic, more flexible, and in a way, we are BlackRock, so we are a money manager. I think of it a little bit like active investing. So in the old days, you could be, if you like, I don't know if my metaphor worked, let's see. So in the old days, from a geopolitical perspective, you could just be long. You just long the benefits of globalization, and it worked very nice, and you don't really need to be so active and intentional in terms of your geopolitical approach. Now, if you like, the geopolitical market is so complicated. Is so many countries, by the way. One stat I like is after the Second World War, is only 50 countries in the UN, is now 200. So you have more, literally more countries, some of them are bumping into each other. So from a geopolitical perspective, I think countries all over the world will need to be much more nimble, much more dynamic, and as I say, like from a stock picker perspective, really pick your partnership. And your portfolio, again, if I can use the metaphor, probably will evolve over time and may even be different at the same time on different subjects. So it's a very different situation. And one observation I have is it's very useful to be flexible. So what I think we will continue to see is less emphasis on so-called supranational organizations. So WTO, UN, they're still very important. I don't want to overmake my point. They're still very important. But having an independence, maybe leaving some of these big supranational organizations to give you a maximum flexibility, I think is useful actually in a much more dynamic, less predictable world. Not only for managing the market from a portfolio perspective is my day job, but also I think is something like the same philosophy to manage the geopolitical relationship in a world where it's very hard to say what will happen even in 6 months, yet alone in 6 years' time.
But don't you think, given the current war between Iran, Israel, and the US, trade will look more political rather than looking at economic indicators? So alliances will shift post the end of this war if it ever ends anytime soon?
So yes, I think yes. So we move from efficiency first to resilience first. You really, all of us, we need to think about this very hard because it changes everything. So from a boring economics perspective, it means inflation should be structurally much higher because sure, we can bring things home, we can do business only with people we like. This makes sense from a geopolitical perspective, but you have to pay. It is a little bit less efficient, so should be a structurally higher inflation. So it's a bit weird. One way to make it kind of more dramatic is we are going to choose inefficiency. Seems a bit strange, right? But the reason we choose inefficiency is because it's a bit fragile. So as many examples, of course, we are very aware of the energy conversation. So this is a very, I don't mean good, but let's say good example of what I'm talking about. But the best example probably is still the chips. So you can think about chips. As economists, the chip, the semiconductor supply chain is beautiful. I really mean it. It's up there with like Michelangelo, maybe I'm boring economist, but it's so beautiful in terms of how lean it is. you have the Dutch guys do the laser, they send it to, so it's unbelievable work of human genius. Okay, but for 2026 is completely crazy. Actually, we are totally reliant on a few square kilometer of one island, 40 kilometer off of Chinese coast. So I'm sad. As economist, I'm sad we are going to move away from beautiful efficiency, but as pragmatic market operator, we have to live in the world as it is, rather than the world as we would prefer. And the answer for your question is yes, we're going to continue to move away from efficiency towards resilience. We all understand why. It makes sense given the complicated world that we are living in, but unfortunately we will have to pay a little bit premium to achieve this resilience over time.
Your Excellency, I want to ask you, so what indicators or early signals does the ECI monitor to identify new markets or corridors even?
So in ECI, the way we work with our clients and customers is really by identifying their needs. What are they exporting? We identify markets where there is a need for these imports. We identify partners in those markets. We look at market data. We look at buyers' data. We assess the risk based on a lot of data sources that we actually invest in to get timely access to this information and decide the risk potential of these exports. So once we do that, then we also plug them within the bigger ecosystem of ECI, where we continue to have access to projects and deals all over the world, and we realize that there's potential for these particular goods and exports from these companies to go into these markets. So we really work with them on navigating those markets, identifying the right markets, and also analyzing all of the risk information through the data sources we have. And also we look at the government leadership efforts in establishing the comprehensive economic partnership agreements with multiple countries around the world, whereby they are negotiating trade barriers and access to enable those companies access those markets. So we focus on these markets, identify the potential, and then work with these companies and the financial institutions to enable them access financing from these financial institutions before they engage into these export markets.
Thank you. Hamad, so supply chain resilience has been the key phrase since 2020, from the pandemic up until now with the closure of the Strait. So what advantages does Abu Dhabi offer companies looking to strengthen production, stores, and distribution capabilities across regional and international markets?
When we talk about resilience, first of all, I mean, Abu Dhabi is a long-term partner. Even when we invite investors, when we talk to them, we say invest with Abu Dhabi, which is something important, and we mean it, because we invite you to be part of the family that we have in Abu Dhabi. So the ecosystem plays a major role into those kind of activities and dialogue that we have with the international investors, but at the same time with the local investors, the way that also we structure things is how we can work together to grow you. So the foundation is something important for us, so we work very closely with the several partners that we have in terms of having a world-class logistic facilities that's available across the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, working very closely also with our partners to facilitate trade with kind of high-end services that will be applicable for them. I think this plays a major role in terms of how we support our companies or the investor who might choose Abu Dhabi as a destination in order to grow. Again, going back to the resilience, I think, the pandemic actually back in 2020 or 2021 gave us several scenarios that we need to build on. And I think when it's come to the United Arab Emirates, we were very good in terms of adopting all the practices that we have seen. And we are ready for many kind of scenarios that which will come over here. I mean, also in terms of trade flow, the way that, our ports actually now currently handling all of this trade flows, it shows you that we were standing in a good foundation into this. So even in our discussion, we lately came from an international roadshow that we did last week. I mean, the partners that we've seen, they are all committed to come and use Abu Dhabi as a hub. And the ones that we shake hand for the first time, we were not surprised to see how they see Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates as a long life partner in terms of that. So I think partnership, strong commitment by investors, infrastructure that plays a major role into the decisions that those companies, whether to invest here or to grow from here, plays a major role into that. And I think this is, in my opinion, if I summarize this, it will be what do you call as a continuous resilience that you have in terms of supporting companies.
But did you see this interest from people, especially amidst everything that's happened? They saw how the UAE was resilient, and it was an extra advantage point to something they already had in mind.
100%. And I think, again, if you look, for example, let's take CEPA agreements that we see now. If you look from February until May, we see that almost no less than 3 CEPAs are enforced already, which is, untapping almost 1.1 trillion US dollar markets for our companies from here. So, I mean, the opportunities are here. And most of the investors and the investor confidence also in the city and in the country, I think increasing in terms of looking at what capabilities that we have in order to make sure that resilience is there, to make sure that today, such an event that's happening, it's a great testament. Looking at what we also were experiencing for the past 2 weeks from the minute that we are coming closer to make it in the Emirates event here in Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates, and what has happened also during the event is a strong commitment to investors to see the capabilities that we have here in Abu Dhabi, in United Arab Emirates when it's come to trade, logistic, as well as manufacturing.
Ben, so the maritime-only dependence has shown to be a single point of failure. We saw it last year with the Red Sea and now currently with the Strait. Does this regional conflict accelerate the strategic necessity of other trade corridors, like, for example, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor?
Yes, I think so. So I'm not so focused, maybe because it's not my expertise in terms of logistics, but I'm personally as a risk manager, I'm not so focused on how the good or service gets from where it's created to where it is needed. I just want to make sure it gets there. So I don't mind if it's maritime or through the air or digitally these days, I'm okay. But what I think is clearly the case is having all of our eggs in one basket is a little bit more risky today than it was just maybe a few months ago. So I think we will need a multiple complementary supply chain, and this gives us optionality from a portfolio perspective. So we need to be, I think, for this question, but as a more general statement, we need to be even more humble than normal. So if you work in market for 25 years like me, for sure you get made humble. You realize maybe I don't know so much. But the world is now hard to predict, really. I mean, we can come out of here and there's a different tweet on different subjects and the world can be changing very fast. So I think as a general statement, rather than have all of your egg in one basket and watch the basket, right? This approach works very well in old paradigm. Now we need to have a diversification. So I think this is true for portfolio construction from a chief strategist at BlackRock perspective, also from the geopolitical perspective, and then for the logistic, it seems to me that having a range of different options is very useful, and then accepting in all humility, we don't know which one of these will be the best in 3 to 5 years' time, but at least we have the kind of the toolkit, the different choices, and then we can be at least have some different options depending on how the world evolves in the months, quarters, and years ahead.
And that takes us back to my opening statement, the diversification ahead of time. So even the UAE, ahead of this conflict, started the pipeline that from 2025, the new pipeline. And also we saw different trade routes like the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. Your Excellency, I want to now ask you, you spoke about the CEPA agreements. How are you using credit lines and partnerships with foreign export agencies to ensure that a UAE manufacturer or SME actually feels the financial benefit of these deals?
Before I answer that, I just want to add one comment on diversification. A few years back, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed at the government summit said in 2051, we will celebrate exporting the last barrel of oil from the UAE. And we will celebrate because by that time we would have diversified our economy into different sectors that will enable us to be resilient and also face such situations. And with diversification, the same goes for ECI. As we diversify our exports, we are covering our clients in more than 100 countries within 30 sectors. And that really enables us to manage those risks in those markets. With regards to CEPA, we actually look at these countries and understand all the specifications of the discussion that has happened and the agreement that has happened between the policymakers and the commercial contributors. So we kind of hold the line in the middle, understand the exemptions and opportunities, and work with the companies that has the interest to tap into these. And then we do the links through the government ecosystem and also our partners. We work with the embassies and the business attaches in all of these countries. We work with the export credit agencies in those countries and with our partners through the different chambers of commerces of the UAE in those countries to identify the right opportunity and to maximize the impact of export for our partners and customers.
Hamad, I want to wrap with you. So regarding the CEPA, are we seeing international manufacturers moving their actual production lines to Abu Dhabi?
Yes. The most important thing, again, goes back to the business offering that's available around you. Now, in terms of relocation, it might be important also for them to look at how much market I'll be covering. Is the consumers from a different, manufacturing aspect will be enough for me? But I think what we offer, it's a strategic location in which those companies looking at the challenges that you might have in several markets. But I think, the stability which we have across, our ecosystem, our track record, the investment that the UAE is actually having in international markets is a strong foundation for you. It's a testament for you. And I think, yes, we see that, and look, going back to make it in the Emirates, the level of announcement that we have seen from automotive, from companies who are doing an external, also investment, companies who are expanding into their current facilities in Abu Dhabi that we have seen a growth in. So we saw a very strong, commitment by those companies. Looking at the companies also we've attracted, or even we've announced specifically on the automotive sector, on the AI, on some other areas and sector that actually growing internationally, gives you the perspective that there is an interest from those companies. Abu Dhabi is an attractive destination for them and the United Arab Emirates. So I think yes, and I think we proved this during, again, the Make It in the Emirates event in terms of just, showcasing several, examples of those investment who are already coming to Abu Dhabi.
Hamad, Your Excellency Rajab Ben, thank you so much for your time today.